A couple of friends and I went on a ski trip some years ago. This was Whitefish, Montana. Four of us went. Me, my friend Tyler, my friend Jenna, and my friend Raul. Tyler always has sunflower seeds on him and leaves shells everywhere. Jenna tracks everything on her watch and gets irritated if a day doesn't count. Raul films little videos of everything, even waiting in line. Saturday night, we went into town after riding all day. Dinner, a couple of drinks, and one more bar because Raul kept saying the night was still young. And suddenly, it was late. We were staying at a small hotel off the main road. The front desk had given us a card with a shuttle number earlier, so we called it, but it went to voicemail. Raul tried rideshare and got a long wait. We stood on the curb with our boards and boots and that tired, buzzy feeling. A white van rolled up with no resort logo and no hotel logo. A small sticker on the windshield said Mountain Shuttle. The driver waved like he recognized us. He leaned out and said he was picking up for the motel on our road. He named our motel without us saying it first. Tyler started walking over, already relieved. I followed because Tyler moves first and thinks later. Jenna and Raul climbed in behind us. The driver said his name was Grant, middle-aged, baseball cap, calm voice, and a lanyard with a card turned inward. The van smelled like wet gloves and cheap air freshener. He told us to buckle up and pulled away. For the first minute, it looked normal. Downtown lights, then the gas station, then the road that leads back towards the motel. Raul was talking. Tyler asked Grant if he skied. Grant answered with short replies. Then Grant turned off the main road. Jenna leaned forward and told him our motel was straight, but he said there was a closure ahead and he was taking the back way. He added that cops were stopping cars up there and he wanted to avoid the checkpoint. That word checkpoint shut everybody up. Tyler sank back. Jenna looked at me like she wanted to argue, then she swallowed it. Raul tried to pull up a map. The little white dot spun. Signal dropped. The streetlights fell away and the road narrowed until snowbanks boxed us in on both sides, trees pressing close enough that branches brushed the van. And at some point, Grant reached over and shut the radio off. The pavement ended without warning and the tires settled into two packed tracks in the snow. The way he kept driving made it obvious this wasn't his first time taking this road. A gate showed up in the headlights. Metal bars, chain, padlock. Grant stopped with the bumper almost kissing it. He put the van in park and sat there. He said we had to wait for maintenance to open it. Jenna asked who maintenance was, and Grant looked back at us for the first time like he was checking something. He raised his hand, palm out, and I saw a knife in his other hand, small folding knife, already open. He told us to stay quiet and said that we weren't getting out until he said so. One at a time. Raul's phone slipped out of his hand and hit the floor, so Grant reached back, picked it up, and set it by the dashboard. When Jenna's thumb moved over her screen, Grant turned, held his hand out, and waited until she passed hers forward. Tyler froze for a second, watching the knife come closer, then handed his phone over too. Grant stepped out into the snow and walked around the passenger side. Cold air poured in while he yanked the sliding door open from outside. The woods beyond the headlights looked like a wall. He grabbed Raul first because he was closest, hooking an arm under his jacket and dragging him toward the door while his boots scraped against the floor. Raul fought and twisted until Grant drove a knee into his thigh, folding him with a sharp, ugly sound. Tyler lunged from the back row and grabbed Grant's shoulder. The knife came around fast and caught him across the forearm, blood soaking through his sleeve as he staggered back, clutching his arm, his face drained of color. Jenna screamed and tried to shove past me toward the door, but Grant backhanded her across the face and she dropped right into the seat, hands at her nose with blood spilling between her fingers. Raul was half out the van already, bent over and gasping. My head went blank, and I grabbed my snowboard bag, swinging it as hard as I could. I caught Grant on the other side of the head and shoulder and knocked him backward into the snow outside. He recovered fast. He turned towards me and launched back through the open sliding door, already bringing the knife up. He drove it into my side before I could move.
My jacket darkened immediately, and my legs gave out, dropping me into the aisle where I slammed into a seat. Everything broke apart after that. Tyler was shouting that his arm felt numb while he pressed it to his chest. Jenna was crying and gagging, struggling to breathe through the blood on her face. Raul dragged himself toward the far seat, yelling for help with one leg barely working. Then headlights flooded the van and washed everything white. A truck came up fast and stopped sideways across the road, strobes flashing. A county plow. The driver jumped out, yelling. Grant slammed the sliding door shut and sprinted into the trees on the right, disappeared pretty quick. Plow driver ran up, pounded on the window, and yelled for us to unlock the door. We spilled out into the snow and stumbled behind the plow like it was a shield. The driver called 911. He kept his flashlight on the tree line and kept telling us to stay tight together. Deputies arrived within minutes. Dogs arrived even. An EMT wrapped Tyler's arm and held gauze to Jenna's face, and they treated my side as well, which needed stitches later. Raul's thigh swelled up immediately, and he could barely put weight on it. They searched the woods for a while, long enough that the adrenaline wore off and the cold started to matter. Deputies followed tracks until they disappeared into rocks and brush, then came back shaking their heads. One went through the van and called things out as they found them. Zip ties in the glove box, duct tape wrapped around the child lock switch like it had been there a long time, and our phones sitting by the dashboard where he dropped them. A deputy asked how we ended up in the van in the first place. I told him we were waiting for a shuttle outside the village when it pulled up, and the driver said he was doing motel pickups on our road. He knew the name of our motel before we said it, which is why we got in. The deputy wrote that down without saying anything, then paused for a second longer than necessary before closing his notebook. We spent the rest of the night at the sheriff's office, answering the same questions over and over. By morning, everything felt unreal, like we'd been awake too long. We flew out later that day with swollen faces, bandages, and bags that still smelled of snow and blood. They never caught him while we were there. Deputies told us the van had been reported stolen earlier that week, and the shuttle sticker wasn't tied to any company they recognized. The gate he stopped at led to old logging roads that ran deep into the woods. People ask what he planned to do past that gate. I don't have an answer that helps. I think about the zip ties, and I think about how calm he was when he took our phones, like it was the first step of something he'd already played out. I think about how fast he switched from friendly to violent once we were boxed in.
Hi, my name's Erica. I'm 23 now, and this happened last winter. I went to Colorado for a few days to snowboard and ski. A friend of mine worked remotely and had a small condo near the mountain that he used a couple weekends a month. He told me I could stay there for free while it was empty as long as I didn't trash it and locked it up. So it was just me, alone, in a quiet place I didn't know well. The first day was normal. I did the usual beginner stuff, fell a lot, got annoyed, got tired, and went back early. The second day is where everything started. I got to the mountain mid-morning. I rented a board because I didn't want to deal with hauling mine on the flight. I remember being in line for the lift and feeling that little pressure you get when you're surrounded by people who clearly know what they're doing, and you're trying to not look like an amateur. First time I noticed him, it was normal enough, just a guy behind me in line. He wasn't dressed like a local or a tourist, not that I could really even tell the difference. Mid-30s, maybe. Nothing about him screamed danger. He didn't stare, he didn't smile, and he didn't do anything that would have made me uncomfortable. I took a few runs, stopped a lot, and eventually set off to the side to fix my binding. While I was there, the same guy stopped nearby and started talking to me. He stayed close without sitting right next to me and asked if I was new. I answered briefly, assuming he'd leave. He offered a few tips, said I'd get the hang of it, and that was it. I got up and went down. I stopped again lower on the mountain, mostly because my legs were burning and I needed a second. I also wanted distance. I remember telling myself not to be dramatic in a public place. People stop, people talk, that's normal. Minute later, I saw him again. Same thing. He stopped near me like it just happened, like it wasn't planned. He didn't act surprised to see me, and he started talking again, asking where I was from, how long I was in town, or if I was here with friends, and if I was staying close by. That's the point where my stomach dropped. Not because a few questions is illegal. It was a set of questions asked in that order by somebody who had already talked to me once and somehow kept popping up exactly when I was alone. I lied. I said I was meeting friends later. I also said I was staying with family. I said whatever I could say without making it a whole scene. I got up and forced myself to ride down without stopping again, even though I wanted to. When I got to the bottom, I went straight inside to the lodge area and stayed around people. I got a drink, sat at a table, and pretended to scroll on my phone and waited. I wanted to see if he'd come down after me, and he did. I saw him come inside. He didn't walk up to me and didn't really look directly at me right away. He just moved around slowly, like he was figuring something out. Then he sat down across the room, not close enough to talk, but close enough that it felt like he picked that spot on purpose. I left early that day. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to sound stupid. Told myself I was in my head too much, that it was probably some bored guy who wanted to flirt, and I was blowing it up because I was alone in a new place. That night, back at the condo, I tried to shake it off. It was a nice place and area, honestly, clean and modern, the kind of place that still has the owner's stuff in the cabinets, like certain mugs you know aren't yours. It was quiet in that nobody's home way, but I didn't feel scared. I cooked, watched a show, then I went to bed. The third day was the worst. I got to the mountain, told myself to stay in the busier areas, stick to lists with lots of people, and don't sit alone off to the side, and don't give anyone an opening. And still, I saw him just enough that I couldn't explain it away anymore. Once in a lift line, once when I was clipping in, and once standing near the same map board I was looking at. He wasn't doing anything specifically wrong, it was just the consistency that made it feel wrong. The last time I saw him on the mountain was mid-afternoon. I was near the bottom, heading toward the main area. I felt stupid for how anxious I was, and I remember thinking, just gotta get through today and get back to the condo. As I was walking with my board, I caught him in my peripheral. He was behind me, and it kind of seemed like he was matching my pace. I turned around and kept walking. When I got to where the shuttle pickups were, I didn't want to stand around outside, so I went inside and waited near a bunch of people. I ordered something I didn't even want, and I sat where I could see the doors. He came in a few minutes later. He didn't try to talk. He walked past me, then doubled back like he forgot something, and paused close enough that I could smell his jacket. He didn't say a word. He just stood there for a second, then kept walking. That was the moment I knew I wasn't misreading it. Got back to the condo before dark, double-checked the lock, checked the windows like I was somebody's mom. I even tried to laugh at myself. I texted my friend a vague message like, "Hey, random question, does anyone else have a key to this place?" And she said her brother did, and maybe the cleaner, but nobody else should. That night, I fell asleep with my pillow and the pillow next to me, even though I knew it wouldn't actually help. I woke up to a noise in the hallway outside my unit. It sounded like heavy movement. I assumed somebody else in the building had come back late. Then I heard a door slam in the hallway outside my door. I got up and went to the peephole. The hallway light was on, and I could see shadows moving quickly across the floor and walls. Somebody was talking, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. A moment later, I heard a woman cry out. It was sudden and real, the kind of sound that makes your stomach drop. My body went cold. I stepped back from the peephole and just stood there stupidly, like my brain didn't know what to do. Then I grabbed my phone and called 911. While the call was connecting, I heard banging and multiple impacts, like someone hitting a door with their shoulder, then more yelling, then footsteps running. The operator answered, and I tried to whisper, gave the address and the unit number, and told her I heard someone trying to force their way into a unit in the hall. I said I was alone, and I also said I didn't know what was happening. I stayed by the door, waiting and listening, freaking out. A couple minutes later, I heard a man's voice in the hall say something sharp, like a command, and then I heard another door open, then more voices, then the sound of someone crying and talking fast, like trying to explain. When the police arrived, I opened it just enough to show my face, and I could see 2 officers down hall and a woman wrapped in a blanket sitting on the floor. Her door was splintered at the frame. I'll never forget that sight. One of the officers asked if I saw anyone. I said I know. I said I heard it. That was it. The woman told them a man had tried to force his way into her unit while she was inside. He didn't succeed fully, but he got far enough that she had to fight for the door to keep it shut and scream for help.
He ran when someone came out of another unit and started yelling. What made me feel sick was what happened next. One of the officers asked her if she recognized him, like maybe it was someone that she knew. She said no, and she kept repeating that he didn't say much, that he just kept pushing and trying the handle like he was sure it should open. The officer looked down the hall at the unit numbers and then back at her, because her unit was right next to mine. Same floor, same hallway, one number up. That's when I realized something I hadn't even thought about until then. Earlier that day, when my friend texted me the door code, she told me her brother changed it recently because the old one was too easy. I almost went to the wrong unit when I first arrived because I mixed up the numbers for a second. I remember standing there keying in the code, getting it wrong and laughing at myself, then walking one door over. I didn't tell the police that. I didn't tell the woman that. It felt disgusting even to think it, like I was making it about me, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The police asked me if I'd been followed or if I had noticed anyone suspicious. I hesitated, and then I told them about the guy on the mountain. I described him, I told them I kept seeing him, and I even told them it felt like he was watching me. One of the officers asked if I had a lift pass with my name on it, or if I used an app or anything like that. I said I did, but I didn't know why that mattered. He didn't explain much, just said they'd take down the info. They never caught him. The next morning, I left. I packed up like I was running late for a flight, even though I had time. I kept checking the windows, and I kept feeling stupid for being scared in broad daylight. I told my friend I was homesick. I didn't tell her the real reason until weeks later. I don't know if that guy on the mountain was the same guy in the hallway. Can't prove it, but I know what it felt like to be watched. I know what it felt like when he looked at me like I finally acknowledged him. And I know how sick I felt standing in my doorway, listening to someone else scream in the room next to mine, knowing I had almost typed in the wrong door code on my first night there.
When I was 9, my family took a trip to a ski resort in West Virginia. My dad really wanted to get his money's worth, so he had my whole family out on the slopes about 20 minutes before the lifts were even running. It was something like 15 degrees, and around lunchtime, my mom and I were getting too cold to have fun. We decided to go get hot chocolates at the food hall, while my dad and brother stayed out for a few more advanced runs, and we all agreed to meet for lunch later after about an hour. My mom and I got our hot chocolate, and we were warming up in the food hall. When I started to feel better, I noticed that the kiddie slope was right outside the building. So I asked my mom if I could do a few runs while waiting for my dad and brother to come back. My mom was usually extremely cautious about letting my brother and me do things on our own, but from where she was sitting, she had a view of the slope through the window, and probably for that reason said okay. At first, everything was fine. I was thrilled to be out on my own and felt invincible, blasting down an easy slope after all the trickier ones I'd been on with my parents. I went down a couple times and I was feeling good when I started to notice myself passing a specific man over and over. This man was very distinctive looking in the crowd of skiing families wearing 90s-style snow gear. He was tall, wearing what looked like a black trench coat, not a ski jacket, had a long dark beard, dark-rimmed glasses, and a black hat with a rim like a short top hat. I don't know the name of this exact style, but it was like a less formal top hat, kind of. As a 9-year-old kid, his appearance scared me a little and reminded me of a cartoon depiction of a bad guy or a robber. I started feeling like I was seeing him everywhere. It wasn't a huge slope, but it still seemed like we passed each other more often than I was passing other skiers. I also started getting this sense that he was trying to get on the lift with me, like waiting to get in line after I did, even though we never ended up being put on a lift together. I couldn't tell if I was being paranoid or if he was really showing up way too often, so I decided to test him. The next time I got off the lift, I went back down the slope like normal, knowing he had been a few chairs behind me and would probably come right down the slope as well. I was about halfway down the hill, I stopped suddenly, and the man passed me. That's when it started getting weird. After passing me, the man went a little further down the hill and gently fell down in a controlled way. He sat on the ground and watched me pass him, then immediately got back up and skied the rest of the way down the hill, getting in line for the lift.
several people behind me. I don't know what he said, but he spoke to all the people that were in line between him and me and managed to get right behind me as I was about to get on the lift. Right as the chair came around, he got up beside me and tried to get on the lift with me. At the last second, I played dumb and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead," and I stepped back to let him on. He seemed surprised by what I said, but got on alone, and I got on the next lift with a mom and her daughter instead. They were really nice, and I had a good talk with them on the way up the hill. For some reason, I was too stupid and shaken up to tell them about the man. I was hoping it looked like they were my family, or at least like someone else on the slope was paying attention to me. At this point, I felt pretty sure that this creepy man had singled me out, and years of my parents' stranger danger training told me that it was probably time to find my mom. I resolved to ski back to the food hall as soon as I was the top of the slope. Instead, I got off the lift, said goodbye to the mom and daughter, and was immediately approached by the man, who clearly waited for me at the top. He came right over to me and said, "Are you all alone?" It's funny to think back now, but at the time I remember being kind of insulted at this question because it sounded so much like all the cheesy lines my parents would come up with when they taught my brother and me about stranger danger. I couldn't believe this guy couldn't think of a less obvious question to ask. I think his audacity in that regard kept me from being as afraid as I otherwise might have been. It made it seem like a game or simulation, which probably helped me act more natural. I answered him very matter-of-factly, saying that I wasn't alone, and pointed to a nearby man and his teenage son, saying that was my dad and brother. Then I walked away very casually, as if I wasn't at all weirded out by his question, and skied down the hill to the food hall, where I quickly found my mom. I told her all about the guy and the weirdness, and while I was still telling her, I saw him come inside and start walking around with his head high, clearly scanning the crowd like he was looking for someone. My mom was really freaked out and didn't let me leave again, even to get food. My dad and brother arrived soon after that, and my mom told my dad the story. He brushed it off as someone probably being awkward but trying to look out for me, but my mom wasn't convinced, and I'm not either. I think about that guy every now and then and wonder what was really going on with him. Why was he dressed so unusually and unseasonably while skiing? Why was he only skiing on the kiddie slope when he didn't seem to be with a family? Why didn't he notice me at all?